The humiliation didn't happen quietly. It happened in public, under bright white lights, with strangers close enough to hear my breathing. The bank lobby smelled like burnt coffee and overheated machines. The floor was so polished it reflected my face back at me, pale, frozen. The teller's fingers stopped moving. She looked at her screen, then at me, then back again. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said softly. "There are no funds in this account." A few people behind me shifted. Someone cleared their throat. My chest tightened. That's when my husband, Mark, laughed. He was leaning against the marble pillar like he owned the place, hands in pockets, smirk ready. His brother and mother stood beside him, arms crossed, already enjoying the show. "Oh, wow," Mark said loudly. "Did you really think that money was still yours?" His mother chuckled. His brother shook his head like I was a joke he'd heard before. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sting. "You were just the saver," he said. "My family deserved it more." Silence fell, the kind that presses on your ears. No one moved. Even the printer behind the counter stopped whirring. I felt my face burn. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the counter. Then something unexpected happened. A man in a gray suit, someone I hadn't even noticed, stepped forward from the waiting area. He placed a leather folder on the counter and looked directly at the teller. "Please check the linked investment account," he said calmly, "under her name." Mark scoffed. "There is no—" The teller's eyes widened. "Oh," she said. "Oh, yes, I see it now." The room shifted. People leaned in. Whispers spread. Someone behind me gasped. Mark's smile collapsed. "What account?" he snapped. The teller turned the screen slightly. "Ma'am, your assets were never drained. They were moved by you into a protected trust. This account alone holds—" She stopped herself, glancing at me. I gave a small nod. Mark's face drained of color. His mother grabbed his arm. His brother stepped back like he didn't know him anymore. The man in the gray suit looked at Mark. "You might want to sit down," he said. "This isn't going your way." For the first time, Mark looked small. I exhaled slowly. He never knew who handled my finances. He never asked why I insisted on certain signatures. He never realized I planned for betrayal. And as the whispers grew louder, as the power in the room shifted back to me, I thought, this is only the beginning. Because 3 months earlier, on a rainy night in March, when I first overheard a phone call that wasn't meant for me, I started preparing for this exact moment. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to Social Old channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. 3 months earlier, it was raining, the kind of rain that feels personal. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady enough to soak through excuses. The windows rattled softly as I stood in the hallway, barefoot on cold tile, holding a mug that had long gone untouched. The clock above the kitchen sink blinked 11:47 p.m., one number dimmer than the rest. I remember noticing that. Little details start screaming at you right before your life splits in two. Mark was supposed to be asleep. That's what he'd said. "Long day, I'm turning in early." He'd kissed my forehead without really looking at me, the way people do when their mind is already somewhere else. But I heard his voice. Low, careful, smoothed down into something practiced. I wasn't trying to listen. I swear that matters. I wasn't snooping or spying or standing there like a jealous wife hunting for proof. I was just walking past the study to put my mug in the sink when his tone stopped me cold. "She doesn't know yet." The hallway felt suddenly narrower. I leaned against the wall without realizing I'd moved. "She trusts me," Mark continued, almost amused. "She always has." There was a pause. Whoever was on the other end said something that made him chuckle. A soft, intimate sound, the kind he used to say for me. "Yeah," he said, It's already in motion. Once it's done, she won't be able to touch it. My fingers tightened around the mug. The ceramic creaked. Touch what? I told myself not to jump to conclusions, that this was probably work, or some complicated tax thing I wouldn't understand anyway. Mark always handled the execution. I handled the saving. That was our balance, or so I thought. Then he said my name. Not lovingly, not casually, strategically. She won't suspect anything, he said. She's careful, not clever. Big difference. Careful, not clever. I felt something detach inside my chest. Not break, detach, like a cord unplugged without warning. Another pause. Rain ticked against the glass. Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocked. And my mother agrees, he went on. It's safer this way. Family money should stay with family. Family money. I stepped back before the floor could betray me. The mug slipped from my hands and shattered, loud and violent against the tile. The talking stopped. The study door opened a crack. Light spilled out, slicing the hallway in half. "You okay?" Mark called, irritation already edging his voice. I stared at the broken mug, brown liquid spreading like a stain. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said. My voice surprised me by sounding normal. "Just clumsy." He watched me for a beat too long. Then the door closed. I stood there long after the rain eased, listening to my own heartbeat, replaying every conversation we'd ever had about money. "We're a team. I'd never do anything without telling you. You worry too much." That night, I didn't confront him. That was my first real decision. Instead, I cleaned up the shards, washed my hands, and went to bed beside a man who was already moving my life around like pieces on a board I hadn't known existed. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I made coffee like always, 2 sugars for him, none for me. Muscle memory is powerful that way. Mark scanned his phone at the table. His mother's name flashed briefly on the screen before he tilted it away. "You're quiet," he said. "Didn't sleep well," I replied. He nodded, satisfied. He liked explanations that didn't require effort. When he left for work, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the rain-streaked window, and did something I had never done in our entire marriage. I opened my laptop. Not to check the joint account, not yet. First, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed a date, March 14. Then I wrote a single sentence. "If I'm wrong, this will cost me nothing. If I'm right, this will save me everything." I started small. I pulled bank statements going back 5 years, highlighted patterns, transfers that always happened on Tuesdays, amounts rounded too cleanly to be accidental. I noticed how often Mark insisted on handling it later, how many times he discouraged me from sitting in meetings, how his mother suddenly had opinions about our finances once my promotions started stacking up. I remembered every moment I brushed off discomfort because it was easier than doubt. By noon, my hands were steady. By evening, I had questions, not accusations. Questions are quieter, safer. Over the next few weeks, I listened more than I spoke. I agreed quickly. I nodded often. I let Mark believe his performance was flawless. At night, I researched trusts, asset protection, legal firewalls. Not because I was planning revenge, because I was planning survival. The first meeting with the financial advisor happened on a Thursday afternoon while Mark thought I was at yoga. The office smelled like lemon polish and paper. The man across from me didn't interrupt when I spoke. That alone felt revolutionary. I said carefully, "Assume someone with signing access doesn't have my best interests in mind." He didn't look shocked. He just nodded and slid a folder across the desk. "There are ways," he said, "to prepare quietly." That word stayed with me. Quietly. By April, the pieces were moving, but not where Mark could see them. By May, I knew exactly what he was trying to do, and by June, I was ready. So when I stood in that bank lobby under brutal white lights, when Mark laughed and thought he had finally stripped me bare in front of strangers, he had no idea. Because the moment I overheard that phone call in the rain, the moment he called me careful, not clever, I stopped being his wife and started becoming his consequence. Once you realize someone is lying to you, the world doesn't explode. It rearranges. Every smile becomes a calculation. Every touch asks a question it didn't before. Mark didn't change. That was the most unsettling part. He still kissed my cheek in the mornings, still complained about traffic, still pretended our life was balanced, fair, normal. I was the one who changed. I learned how to become invisible. Not absent, invisible. I laughed at the right moments. I asked his mother about her knee pain. I let his brother explain finances to me like I was hearing it for the first time. I let them believe I was grateful for their guidance. Inside, I was counting. Every Sunday dinner revealed something new. A slip of the tongue, a glance exchanged too quickly, a comment about future arrangements that stopped short of details. They spoke around me, not to me, which told me everything. The second meeting with the advisor happened in a building that didn't have a name on the door, just a number. The elevator smelled faintly of metal and old paper. I liked that. Anonymous places made honest work easier. Protection, he said, folding his hands, isn't about hiding money. It's about changing who controls the narrative. He explained it slowly. The trust, the structure, the signatures that mattered more than appearances. How authority could exist without noise. I signed nothing that day. I went home and thought. That night, Mark mentioned a temporary transfer he'd be handling soon. He said it casually, like mentioning the weather. I nodded. How temporary? I asked. He shrugged. You worry too much. It's family stuff. Family stuff. The phrase tasted different now. I waited 3 days before acting, long enough to seem unconnected, short enough to matter. The third meeting was where everything shifted. The gray-suited man was there that day, sitting quietly in the corner, not taking notes, just listening. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. When the advisor finally looked at me and asked, "Are you ready to proceed?" I thought of the rain, the mug shattering, Mark's voice saying my name like it was a weakness. Yes, I said. The process didn't feel dramatic. No alarms, no sudden power surge. Just signatures placed carefully, assets redirected without fanfare, authority reassigned in ways that couldn't be undone by charm or entitlement. By the time I walked out, my hands were trembling, not from fear, from relief. At home, I became even smaller. I asked Mark if he needed help with anything. I transferred modest amounts when he asked. I let him believe he was winning. People reveal their cruelty when they think they're safe. His mother began making jokes about allowances, about how I was lucky to be taken care of. His brother started using words like "we" when referring to money I had earned. I memorized everything. By the end of June, the trust was sealed, silent, legal, untouchable. I didn't tell anyone. That was the point. The night before the bank visit, Mark barely looked at me. He was already rehearsing. I could feel it. The confidence of a man who thinks the floor beneath him is solid. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling fan slicing the dark into steady pieces. Tomorrow, he would try to erase me. Tomorrow, he would fail. And when the morning came, I dressed carefully, not to impress, not to fight, to witness. Because disappearing, I'd learned, was never about being weak. It was about choosing the moment to reappear. Mark chose the bank, not because it was necessary, but because it was symbolic. He told me we should go together, said it with a softness that felt rehearsed, like this was something he'd practiced in his head. Closure, he'd called it. Transparency. I almost laughed. The morning air was sharp when we stepped outside. The sky held that pale, indifferent color it gets when it doesn't care what happens to you. Mark walked half a step ahead of me, already in control of the pace. His mother and brother met us in the parking lot. Of course they did. She hugged Mark, not me. His brother nodded in my direction like I was an afterthought. They spoke in low voices while I stood there, invisible again, exactly how they liked me. Inside, the bank smelled the same as it always does. Burnt coffee, overheated machines, impatience. Fluorescent lights flattened everything, stripped warmth from faces. Mark leaned in and whispered, "Just let me handle the talking." I did. The teller smiled politely at first, asked for ID, typed, paused, typed again. The moment stretched. I saw it before she said anything, the flicker of confusion, the recalculation behind her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am, there are no available funds in this account." The words landed exactly where Mark wanted them to. He laughed, loud, confident, a laugh meant to echo. People turned. "Oh, wow," he said, shaking his head. "Did you really think that money was still yours?" His mother chuckled. His brother smiled like this was overdue. Mark leaned closer, lowered his voice just enough to bruise. "You were just the saver," he said. "My family deserved it more." Silence dropped hard, and for a moment, just a moment, I let myself feel it. The heat in my face, the tightening in my chest, the humiliation he'd choreographed so carefully. Because some performances deserve a full audience. Then the man in the gray suit stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't announce himself, just placed a leather folder on the counter like it had always belonged there. "Please check the linked investment account," he said calmly, "under her name." Mark scoffed. "There is no—" The teller's eyes widened. "Oh," she said. "Oh, yes, I see it now." The room shifted. People leaned in, whispers spread. Someone gasped. "What account?" Mark snapped. The teller turned the screen slightly. "Ma'am, your assets were never drained. They were moved, by you, into a protected trust." She stopped, looked at me. I nodded. "This account alone holds—" She didn't finish. Mark's face drained of color. His mother grabbed his arm. His brother took a step back like proximity suddenly carried risk. The gray-suited man finally looked at Mark. "He might want to sit down," he said. "This isn't going your way." For the first time, Mark looked small, and as the tower returned to my body, slow and deliberate, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment the story stopped being his. The laughter didn't stop all at once. It thinned first, like smoke losing its shape. Mark tried to recover, straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, forced a smile that didn't know where to sit anymore. "This is some kind of misunderstanding," he said, too loudly. "She doesn't even understand investments." The words hung in the air. The teller didn't look at him. She was still looking at me now, waiting. The gray-suited man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "She understands enough," he said, "to ensure sole authority." Mark blinked. Once. Twice. "Sole what?" The man opened the folder. Pages crisp, organized, quietly lethal. "The trust was established months ago," he continued. "Irrevocable, multi-signature protected. You have no access. Neither does your family." Mark's mother laughed, a short, brittle sound. "That's impossible," she said. "My son would have known." The advisor finally met her eyes. He wasn't required to. Something in her posture collapsed, not dramatically, subtly, like a chair leg giving way. Mark stepped closer to the counter, palms flat against the marble. "You did this behind my back," he hissed. I studied his face. This man who had memorized my habits, my fears, my routines, yet never once asked how my mind worked. I did it in front of you, I said quietly. You just never saw me as someone capable. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. The teller cleared her throat. Ma'am, would you like to proceed with your original request? Mark turned sharply. What request? I met his eyes. I came to confirm, I said, that my finances are intact. The teller nodded. They are. A pause. Fully protected. The phrase echoed. People behind us weren't whispering anymore. They were watching, faces no longer curious, evaluating. Mark's brother spoke for the first time since the shift. Let's just go, he muttered. Mark didn't move. He was still trying to rewrite the scene in his head, searching for a version where he didn't lose. This isn't over, he said, pointing at me. You think this makes you powerful? I tilted my head. No, I said, it makes me safe. The gray-suited man closed the folder. Shall we? He asked me. I stepped away from the counter. Mark's mother reached for my arm, missed. After everything we did for you, she said. I stopped, turned back slowly. You didn't do anything for me. You did things with my money. That was when the room finally went silent. Not tense silence, finished silence. As we walked out, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because some doors don't slam. They lock. The car ride back was quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that vibrates. Mark drove. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. The city passed outside the windows, indifferent. Traffic lights changed. People crossed streets. Life continued like nothing had cracked open inside that car. I watched my reflection in the glass. I looked the same. That felt strange. Mark spoke first. You embarrassed me. I didn't answer. You made me look like a fool, he continued, voice rising, in front of my family, in public. Still nothing. Silence unnerves people who rely on control. You planned this, he said. You set me up. I turned to him then. No, I said. I prepared. He laughed, sharp and humorless. You think you're smarter than me now? I thought of the documents, the signatures, the quiet months of watching. I think I stopped underestimating myself, I said. That shut him up. At home, his mother was already there, sitting at the kitchen table like she'd always belonged there, like she still did. Her purse was placed neatly beside her chair, ready. She stood when she saw me. We need to talk, she said. I set my bag down slowly. No, I replied. You need to listen. Her eyes narrowed. This family supported you, she snapped. We welcomed you. I met her gaze. Didn't blink. You monitored me, I said. You advised him to take what wasn't yours. You laughed when you thought I was powerless. Mark's brother arrived mid-argument, hovering near the doorway, not choosing a side, just calculating risk. You went too far, Mark said. You could have just talked to me. I smiled. I tried, I said. You were always busy moving things without me. His mother leaned forward. You owe us an explanation, she said. I shook my head. I don't owe you access. The room felt smaller, like walls closing in. Mark's voice dropped. So what now? He asked. Now. The word tasted heavy. Now, I said, nothing changes on the surface. They all looked confused. We still live here, I continued. We still act normal, but the finances are no longer shared. Mark stiffened. That's not how marriage works. That's how trust works, I replied. Once it's broken, access is revoked. His mother scoffed. You can't just. I can, and I did. Another silence. This one different. Fear has a sound. It's quiet, but unstable. I walked to the bedroom and closed the door behind me. Not slammed, just closed. That night, I slept for the first time in months. Not because things were over, but because I finally knew exactly where I stood. And so did they. The house didn't explode after that. It stilled. Mornings became careful, voices lowered, doors closed softly instead of loudly. Mark started asking questions he'd never asked before, small ones disguised as concern. Did you move anything else? Who was that man, really? Are we okay? I answered selectively. Nothing you need access to. A professional. That depends on your behavior. Control doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes. Mark began staying out later. His mother visited less often. His brother stopped texting entirely. When people realize they can't manipulate the outcome, they withdraw to protect their pride. I watched it happen without comment. One evening, Mark finally snapped. "You don't get to punish me forever," he said. "You made your point." I looked up from my laptop. "This isn't punishment," I replied. "This is consequence." He stared at me like I was someone he'd never met. "I built this life," he said. I nodded. "And I funded it." That ended the argument. A week later, I met the advisor again. Same quiet office, same lack of signage. "You're at a crossroads now," he said. "You can maintain distance or formalize it." Formalize. I thought about the way Mark watched me now, like an opponent, like a risk. "Prepare the documents," I said. At home, I began removing things quietly. Important papers, jewelry with history, items that couldn't be replaced. Mark noticed, but too late. "You're planning something," he accused. "Yes," I said. Freedom. That night, he slept on the couch. 2 days later, he asked if we could start fresh. I asked him one question. "When you thought I had nothing, how did you treat me?" He had no answer. That was mine. The courtroom didn't look the way people imagine it does. No drama, no echoing footsteps, just clean lines, pale wood, and the quiet confidence of a system that doesn't care about feelings, only facts. Mark sat across from me, smaller somehow, not defeated, exposed. His lawyer whispered urgently, papers shuffled, strategies adjusted too late. His mother wasn't there. That told me everything. When my name was called, I stood without shaking. The judge listened. That mattered more than anything else. The trust documents spoke first. Dates, signatures, authority. Every quiet step I'd taken lined up neatly, impossible to dismiss as emotion or spite. Mark's lawyer tried to frame it as secrecy. Marital assets, he argued, lack of disclosure. My attorney didn't raise his voice. Protection, he said, established in response to financial coercion. The word coercion landed hard. The judge looked at Mark. "Did you redirect joint funds without consent?" she asked. Mark hesitated. Silence again. "Yes," he said finally. That was it. The ruling wasn't loud. It never is. Access revoked, trust upheld, separation approved. Mark didn't look at me as we left. Outside, the air felt lighter, like gravity had loosened its grip. I signed the final paper in the hallway. One stroke. That was all it took to end a story he thought he controlled. I moved out on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays are symbolic, but because that was when the movers were available. Life after collapse is practical like that. The new place was smaller, quieter. The windows didn't rattle. The floor didn't shine back a reflection I barely recognized. It felt earned. I unpacked slowly, chose where things belonged, decided what stayed and what didn't. No one rushed me. Mark tried once more. A message, carefully worded, apologetic in tone, empty in substance. "We both made mistakes. I never meant to hurt you. Can we talk?" I deleted it without replying. Because closure doesn't come from conversations with people who rewrite history. It comes from living a life they no longer influence. The trust remained, silent, steady, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. Months passed. I rebuilt routines, morning walks, evenings with books instead of explanations. I learned what peace sounds like when it isn't interrupted. One afternoon, I passed the same bank. The same glass doors, the same bright lights. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Power, I learned, isn't humiliation or victory or watching someone else fall. Power is knowing you saw the betrayal coming and chose yourself anyway. And sometimes, survival looks very much like silence.